President Donald Trump and the leader of Russia, Vladimir Putin, just had their high-stakes meeting in Anchorage, Alaska to discuss peace terms over the Russia-Ukraine war. And there is a lot to talk about, from literally the handshake when Putin was getting out of the plane to the actual joint press conference. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Putin gets off the plane, and notably, you can see Trump pacing around almost unevenly. I've seen some people say that this is him walking unevenly and drawing parallels to Biden. Well, trust me, that's not enough to draw parallels to Biden. Although there was an interesting gaffe where Trump got Anchorage, Alaska confused with Russia during a press conference and said that he was meeting with Putin in Russia.
It's going to be a big thing. We're going to Russia. That's going to be a big deal.
So that one was a little bit interesting, but notably, Trump is pacing around before meeting with Putin. So does that indicate that he's nervous to meet with President Putin? Understandably, Putin is a scary man, former member of the KGB, probably a very good emotional reader. So Putin steps off the plane and he shakes hands with Trump and they smile and they take a photo. And I've seen a lot of Democrats like Harry Sisson calling this out and saying Putin should have been treated like a war criminal and should have been arrested on the spot upon landing in the US. And I'm just asking, where was this energy for international war criminal Bibi Netanyahu when he touched down on the U.S.? I didn't see you guys tweeting then. I seen a completely different set of people tweeting, but it's almost like you guys weren't allowed to tweet that. And also, here's a picture of Obama shaking hands with Putin and smiling. And here's a picture of Hillary Clinton shaking hands with Putin smiling. So just because somebody is a war criminal and does stuff that I disagree with, even like nobody's going to condone the Russia invasion of Ukraine. Nobody's going to say, oh yeah, Putin's a nice guy. He's not a dictator at all. Only been leader of Russia for the past how many years? 20 plus years, as long as I've been alive. And I'm not denying that Putin's a dictator, but does that mean that we should come at the negotiations from a place of hostility and make it contentious from the beginning, from the get-go? I don't think that that's going to be a wise negotiating strategy. Trump has a book called The Art of the Deal. I haven't read the whole thing, but I've seen snippets here and there, and that doesn't seem like a very effective way of deal making to me personally. Moving into the joint news conference that they had, Vladimir Putin starts off speaking and talks about how the US and Russia actually has a lot of shared cultural history, saying that, they both have historical ties to Alaska, talks about the land lease program and the courageousness of US and Russian pilots, says that both countries have a memorial with, each country's flag placed at it, said that he thought that that was very noble. And I know a lot of people are going to say that this is Vladimir Putin essentially kissing up to Trump in an attempt to manipulate him. And I would argue that a KGB agent who's been the leader of fucking Russia, the second or maybe third most powerful country in the entire world for the past 25 years, I think he would be a little bit more secretive instead of just trying to openly manipulate the president. Unless you guys are going to argue, oh, well, he's trying to make people think that he's manipulating Trump. So that way people criticize Trump for being so susceptible to obvious manipulation. We could go on this layers argument for miles, but I just don't think that Vladimir Putin was manipulating Trump in front of the entire world. I just don't see that. Like I said before, I do think it's wise to start the negotiations and keep things very cordial. I don't think it's a bad thing for the US and Russia to have good relations. This will objectively help the economy of both countries if we don't have to impose sanctions on them. They're able to help out the EU. The EU is our ally. I don't think that it would be a bad thing for the relations to soften, even if we don't agree with the actions of the ruler. Notably, it is worth trying to pursue a peace deal. And people are saying, well, Zelensky should have been there. And I agree, Zelensky should have been there. But Trump is going to relay the message to Zelensky the same way that when Zelensky met in the White House, Putin wasn't there. And they were going to relay the message to Putin. This is a nice way to basically middleman the negotiations, because obviously getting the leaders of Ukraine and Russia when they're at war in the same room, in the same spot, with both sides being trustworthy is a very difficult thing to do. So I think it's very, it's worth praising President Trump for at least trying to solve the Ukraine conflict, because something Vladimir Putin said that I think was very pertinent was that the US and Russia hadn't had any meetings in the last 4 years. In the last 4 years. That's crazy. The fact that Biden, the leader of the two biggest, arguably biggest empires in the entire world, the most dominant countries, are not going to meet for the entirety of Biden's presidency. I don't think that we can debate that that's wrong. Even if you're going to meet him to scold him and talk about all the wrong that he's doing and attempt to find peace, you should still attempt to find peace. Putin then goes on to, of course, talk about that he wants the security of Russia, and he does want to see an end to the conflict, and he sees Ukraine as a brother nation, and he acknowledges how hypocritical that sounds, which shows to me that even Putin knows that he's in the wrong for the invasion, quite obviously. But he then mentions that he'd be willing to honor the security of Ukraine as well. What does that mean exactly? I don't know. Trump eventually starts talking and says that him and Putin have come to some sort of agreement, but there's a couple pieces that are still missing, which is what I'm going to draw in is say, I think the piece that is still missing is, okay, we both want peace. We both want to stop the dying of soldiers and men in the country. But what exactly are going to be the land borders coming out of it? I think Crimea in particular is the biggest point of contention because Russia has had control of Crimea since 2014, and they have a large Russian population in Crimea even prior to that. They did have a lot of revolutions, referendums in that area, and Russia did get rid of Ukrainian citizens in the area and imported their own Russian citizens into the area. So it is predominantly going to favor Russia. If you had a democratic election in Crimea today, it would probably, in a fair legal election, vote to stay with Russia based on the population that the Russians put in. So I know that Zelensky believes that the sovereign borders of Ukraine, based on agreements that are formed in the 1900s, that Crimea should be Ukrainian territory. So I think that's going to be the biggest point of contention. I don't know, it's very tough to find a deal with it because in my head, it makes sense for Russia to want to keep some of the Donbass in the area that they have been occupying for the last 2 years and as well have a security blanket. We do have to think about the prior history of Russia. Russia is a traumatized and hurt nation. During the World War II, Russia lost over 12 million people between soldiers and military alike. That is insane. We talk about the 6 million from a different group, but we don't talk about the 12 million that the Russians lost, and possibly even more than that. We also don't talk about how they were invaded in World War I and in the Napoleonic Wars and have constantly been pushed from this western side, which notoriously is very easy and flat land to just walk over, straight walk all the way to Moscow. Napoleon was able to do it. The short man with the silly mustache was able to do it. The Russians actually had to sign a peace treaty in 1917 during World War I. So I don't think it's fully out of the realm of possibility for Russia to not want, it's not out of the realm of reasonable to want Ukraine to not join NATO, or maybe to, at least if they do join NATO, make sure certain weapons or certain things are not allowed in Ukraine. It's a very delicate situation for Russia, who has had its own leaders traumatize the nation as well. Of course, under the terrible reigns of Joseph Stalin and Vladimir Lenin, who ruled with iron fists. Russia is a very traumatized nation, and the people do fear for their safety. They do fear the West, and the West has done a lot of heinous things. Our government is not perfect. We've launched a lot of unjust invasions, foreign wars, and we very well have a military industrial complex that encourages war. So as much as I do not agree with the invasion at all, Russia not wanting Ukraine in NATO is not entirely unreasonable from a historical context, in my opinion. So I think the Donbass will be a contentious area as well, but that's what I think the one factor is that Trump mentioned is land, just purely land. Everything else is easy. Of course we want peace. Of course we want to stop. Maybe we can come to some sort of arms agreement where, no one's going to invade Ukraine and no one's going to invade Russia, but I think Russia wants some sort of buffer zone. And the problem is how do you enforce a buffer zone if neither side can have a close military presence to the other. So it's very tough negotiations. I don't know what type of deal that Trump and Putin supposedly came with. I don't know, and I don't think anyone knows if Zelensky's going to agree with it. So, it's a very tough situation. But overall, I do commend President Trump for at least trying. He sat down with both leaders, and a lot of people are saying, oh, here's the picture with Trump shaking hands with Putin, and here's him arguing with Zelensky. Trump shook hands with Zelensky. That meeting was an hour long, and it went generally well for 50 minutes. There was some laughs shared, a lot of questions feeded by the audience or the news press that was there. But of course, people only want to show you the last 5 minutes. I absolutely would dare you guys. Go watch that full Zelensky-Trump meeting. It seemed like Zelensky and Vance went at it, and I think Vance is a little bit more suspicious. Maybe he sabotaged it on purpose. Allegedly, I'm not throwing out any accusations. I don't know anything, but I've never gotten a particularly good vibe from JD Vance. But like I said, I commend President Trump for trying. I absolutely shun and condemn Joe Biden for not trying to end this war, because I think we can all agree that we don't want people dying. Do I think that Trump is in the wrong for meeting with President Putin and shaking his hand? No, of course. I showed you guys. Democrats have done it as well. Putin has a lot of cards in his hand. So why would you want to come at a negotiation from a place of being behind or a place of hostility? It just doesn't make sense to me. I feel like if the Democrats did it and they were shaking hands with Vladimir Putin and Biden was trying to settle the conflict, the Democrats would be the first to say, woo, look at Biden. Look at him, the peacemaker, going to Russia, doing this, making history, peace president. Even Hillary Clinton, allegedly, according to the New York Post, I don't know how true this statement is, said that if Trump can solve the Ukraine conflict without Ukraine making major concessions, which I would imagine being land, that he should win the Nobel Peace Prize. Hillary Clinton said that, the notable rival. So, I don't see how anybody can criticize Trump for meeting with President Putin and at least trying him. And to say that we should lock him up as a war criminal, like I said earlier, where was that energy with Bibi Netanyahu, who is undoubtedly a war criminal, who is trying to bait the United States into war with Iran and is just eviscerating the Gazan people? That's the word we'll use that won't get us taken down on YouTube. But anyway, just wanted to quickly address the Trump and Putin meeting. I don't know what exactly to make of it. Like I said, it's very difficult to actually figure out what the negotiations and the final deal will be that both countries would agree with. But ultimately, I do hope that we find some peace. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below if you guys have any possibilities for what would be a reasonable solution for both of the countries that, everybody would be happy with. Even if Putin's a bad man, we have to understand that, and I think he's a bad man. If you don't think he's a bad man, I think you need to check your priorities. But we need to make sure that he is willing to come to the table. And even if we don't like it in this situation, we do have to negotiate with a terrorist. Even if we view Vladimir Putin that way, there's no other choice. It's for the greater good. It's to stop a war, to stop the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. It's more than worth it. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you hit like and subscribe if you did. Peace out.